The disintegration of the West. To the Greeks, man lives in nature. To the prophets, man lives in history. Abraham Heschel. Arnold Toynbee, in a study of history, argued that civilizations have a specific historical structure. If we apply this to the West, we get the following picture. In the Middle Ages, Italian traders invented the fundamental technology of the West: double-entry bookkeeping, the bank, the capitalist corporation. By the end of the 15th century, Spanish and Portuguese traders had invented ocean-going vessels, gunboats, and global trade. During the 17th and 18th century, the European powers used monopoly capitalism in the various trading companies and gunboats to dominate the world. At home, they engaged in democratic revolutions to replace the rule of the landed aristocracy with the rule of the merchant class. By 1870, the British Empire was the world hegemon, using their economic clout and the Royal Navy to bully the other European powers. Between 1914 to 1945, Europe experienced two world wars, what Toynbee would call a time of troubles. At home, Russia experienced a communist revolution as a peasant and working class revolt against the rule by the aristocracy and the merchant class. The West was breaking down. From 1950 to the present, we have American hegemony. And as the world's sole superpower, it became the world leader, or what Toynbee calls a universal state, which rules through the World Trade Organization, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and the CIA. Unable to solve the modern social problems, the creative elite became a dominant elite, maintaining its privileges by force and propaganda at home and the use of the CIA and the military abroad. The establishment of a universal state after a time of troubles is a rally after a rout, and the dissolution of a universal state is the final rout. We are in a time of disintegration. Each of the fundamental functions of Western society are in crisis. Technological crisis. We are systematically destroying our environment. Defense crisis. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Nuclear weapons are proliferating. Creative crisis. Social problems seem insoluble. Educational crisis. Education is excluding more and more people from the social project. Time crisis. The speed of our society has become so fast that there is an attention span of 15 seconds. Territorial crisis. We are making large areas of Earth uninhabitable. Population crisis. There are millions of refugees fleeing civil wars and economic destitution. Economic crisis. The growing homelessness and hunger means that we have a failed economy. Political crisis. People have lost faith in the elites. Barbarian war bands took down the World Trade Center. The President of the United States attempted an armed coup to bring down the democracy. Disintegration is a loss of faith in the elites. A society is controlled by the ideas that make up its culture. The failure of the cultural program results from unrealistic models, disastrous values, and inadequate resources. The Western worldview is materialism. The Western vision has captivated the world and can be summed up as liberty, prosperity, and science. Liberty from the demands of other people, society, nature, and God. Things like love, compassion, community are not considered real. This is an unrealistic worldview. Prosperity, defined as maximizing individual consumption measured by gross domestic product, is a disastrous value set. It is destroying our environment. Science, defined as mechanistic reductionism, does not provide the kind of options we need for dealing with our social problems. Social problems cannot be solved by the application of force or by hard work. The tragedy of individualism. The failure of Western culture is what economists call the tragedy of the commons, but it is more accurately called the tragedy of individualism. People put their own goals ahead of the needs of the common good. This is the definition of corruption. Because it sees only individuals, our current worldview results in the inability to deal with social problems, environmental problems, or moral problems. The moral incompetence of science is particularly devastating. Mechanistic reductionist science. Peter Drucker gives the following account. The new Nazi commissar immediately announced that Jews would be forbidden to enter university premises and would be dismissed without salary. Then he launched into a tirade of abuse, filth, and four-letter words. There was dead silence. Everyone waited for the distinguished biochemist. The great liberal got up, cleared his throat, and said, "Very interesting, Mr. Commissar, and in some respects very illuminating. But one point I didn't get too clearly. Will there be more money for research in physiology?" 48 hours later, Drucker was on a train out of Germany. He was a Catholic who had written a book about a Jewish economist. The problem with materialist science is that there is no moral responsibility. The world is seen as a deterministic machine driven by cause and effect. There are no decisions, only mechanical responses. Therefore, there is no responsibility. The scientist is merely a detached observer. The problems. There are two problems that the West has created and has failed to solve. The core Western institution is international capitalism. Its primary purpose is the exponential growth of capital. It thus leads to massive inequality, exploitation of the workers, and recurring capitalist crises. But, combined with science, it does promote economic growth. Unfortunately, the exponential growth of consumption is destroying our environment. The second Western invention is nationalism. In the 16th century, the West began replacing Christianity as the cultural religion with nationalism. The resulting nationalist wars have been devastating and are threatening to create a nuclear holocaust. These inventions are contradictory. In a world of nation-states, the American empire has difficulty maintaining its control over international capitalism. Modern American history can be seen as this struggle for world hegemony. Success: subversion of the Soviet Union and destruction of the Russian economy. Failure: 9/11, attacks by Islamic war bands. Rally: invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Failure: Iraq, Afghanistan, the expense of keeping a foreign culture in subjugation. Failure: housing bubble, capitalist crisis. Rally: stimulus. Failure: election of Donald Trump, internal populist rebellion against international capitalism, endless wars, and economic pauperization. Failure: pandemic, capitalist healthcare, and political conflict. The failures are starting to outnumber the successes. There is a failure, a rally, and then a failure.